So hello and thank you for joining us. We are doing a podcast this week and you will no doubt have heard the news, but we're doing it from Windsor because it's currently Sunday evening here in the UK. We are just over 2 days now since the announcement of the passing of the Duke of Edinburgh. So we thought we would change things around. The podcast we had recorded that was going to run this week on Friday clearly didn't, and things have changed somewhat. But welcome to Cambridge Gate at Windsor Castle.
Yep, just at the end of the long walk with the castle right behind us, and that is, as Chris says, following the news that was announced at midday on Friday the 9th of April in a statement that was made by Royal Communications that read, "It is with deep sorrow that Her Majesty the Queen announces the death of her beloved husband, His Royal Highness the Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. His Royal Highness passed away peacefully this morning at Windsor Castle. Further announcements will be made in due course. The royal family join with people around the world in mourning his loss."
So that was a statement released at about a minute past midday here in the UK on Friday. Feels like quite a long time ago. A lot has happened. We've heard from all four of the Queen's children in the past 48 hours. We'll bring you that as well. You won't want us to necessarily reflect on everything that's been going on because you would have heard that in the news, but we just thought we'd sort of give a wrap up of everything that's kind of happened this weekend and tell you what we know and about the funeral arrangements which will happen here at Windsor Castle next week. Now look, for those of you watching on YouTube, why don't you have a quick look about where we are. If you we get Mark the cameraman, whose hands are quite cold, I have to tell you, because it is quite cold here, just to spin round that away, Mark, I think, and you will see the long walk. Now if you take yourselves back to May 2018, the 19th of May 2018, this was full of crowds, and that long walk, called because it is long and people walk on it, is where Harry and Meghan came up in their carriage after their wedding. You can see there a camera crew setting up. If my knowledge serves me correctly, that camera crew is from New Zealand's television, and this of course has been an international story, not just a British one, not just about the royal family.
Yeah, I think though lots of people have we've been reflecting over the last few days about the Duke of Edinburgh and his life, and I think the thing that has stood out most of all is his life with the Queen, her strength and stay, as she called him all those years ago, her beloved husband, as she called him in the statement. He's the man that's been by her side for 73 years, the 73rd wedding anniversary last November.
Yeah, the 73rd and last wedding anniversary, wasn't it,
by her
November?
side in public or just a few steps behind, and also in private, her rock, her confidant throughout all those years.
You mentioned strength and stay. It's kind of, you might have heard the word a lot. It was on some of the front pages of the newspapers. It comes from a speech that the Queen made herself in 1997. Interestingly, not long after the death of Princess Diana in 1997, when they were giving a speech to mark their golden wedding anniversary. So we're talking November of 97. And that strength and stay speech came from then. And on the royal family website, on the morning after they made the announcement, they did put up a longer quote of that particular speech, which will show you the tweet that the royal family put up there. And it is referring to that long speech that the Queen made on behalf of her husband, because she thought it was about time that somebody should thank him for what he's done. And I'll read you a bit of that speech now that the royal family put up, as you can see on their Twitter. "He has quite simply been my strength and stay all these years, and I and his whole family, and this and many other countries, owe him a debt greater than he would ever claim or we shall ever know." And I think that's quite poignant. We keep referring to strength and stay, don't we? But it's quite poignant that they put that up. That was kind of their first tweet, I think, having a look at their Twitter feed after the death. And that came on Saturday morning. We'll run through the funeral details with you. Should we just talk about the children, because it's been quite poignant, isn't it, to have heard first from Prince Charles, but then also from two of the other children and a statement from Princess Anne.
Yeah, and I thought incredibly personal and touching tributes from all of them. that we've had over the last 24 hours, which started with Charles. Yesterday on Saturday, he delivered a TV address from Highgrove, didn't he, talking about his dear papa.
I particularly wanted to say that my father, I suppose the last 70 years, has given the most remarkable, devoted service to the Queen, to my family, and to the country, and also to the whole of the Commonwealth. And as you can imagine, my family and I miss my father enormously. He was a much-loved and appreciated figure. And apart from anything else, I can imagine, and we're so deeply touched by the number of other people here and elsewhere around the world in the Commonwealth who also, I think, share our loss and our sorrow. And my dear papa was a very special person who, I think above all else, would have been amazed by the reaction and the touching things that have been said about him. And from that point of view, we are, my family, deeply grateful for all that. It will sustain us in this particular loss and at this particularly sad time. Thank you.
That was made by Prince Charles, who did that from Highgrove. Now, that was released at 6 p.m. on the Saturday evening. It was the first time that we heard on camera from a member of the family. I'll just show you, there's been a lot of debate about flowers, actually. Mark, if your fingers are still warm enough, can you have a look, show everyone those flowers just up here. So this is Cambridge Gate at the end of the Long Walk. Now, you can see there some of the flowers that have been left. Now, Lizzie, let's just discuss this issue, and I think it is a bit of a problem, not a massive one, but people have been asked not to leave flowers, but instinctively they do want to.
Yeah, obviously this has happened during the COVID pandemic, so the public are being asked not to gather for crowds, not to form, and they're being encouraged, rather than bringing flowers to royal residences, to perhaps consider making a donation to a charity, something that's close to their heart, or maybe a patronage of the Duke of Edinburgh's. I mean, he had so many, didn't he?
They were quite clear. They didn't just say They didn't just say make it to his charities. Anything that's close to your heart. They would rather that you did that than to bring flowers, because the problem we've got is that everything that has to be done in marking the Duke's life is to keep it COVID secure, and that is the problem. I mean, that's why we are standing socially distant here on the Long Walk.
And the other change is that online. The Book of Condolences online now, rather than in physical form, to encourage people again to do things privately, to commemorate his life privately, and not come and gather in crowds. And actually, it's quite quiet now.
I mean, I don't say crowds as such, but we were here earlier, and so the flowers that you see up there were just those that have been laid today. So kind of at the end of the day, and it's evening time in the UK at the moment. It's got quite quiet here. But we were down here in the middle of the afternoon, and it was actually very busy. And as you left Cambridge Gate and we walked back towards Windsor Castle, there was just a stream of people coming with flowers, wasn't there? Like people asking police officers, where can I put these? They're all being directed here, but the interesting thing is that they are being moved every evening.
They're being moved because I think that they think that if flowers becomes a focal point, that will encourage more people to gather. So every night they take the flowers that are there, they go inside the walls of the castle, and those are being arranged near the chapel and will be laid out for the funeral on Saturday the 17th. Not
that they want to encourage people to bring more flowers, but it's going to kind of feel like a carpet of flowers will be inside the walls of the Windsor Castle by the time of the funeral on Saturday. So 3 p.m. on Saturday, the funeral. We're running through some details of that at the moment. But once again, for the funeral, you're being asked not to turn up, not to come to Windsor, and actually to watch it on TV. It's going to be broadcast live. So,
but actually, all four of his children have said how lovely and comforting it has been over the last few days to
get
have
so
much support from the public and so many tributes, and that has meant a huge amount to them at a time of mourning for them.
So, Lizzie, this morning you went and filmed. So, Windsor Great Park is pretty big. in Windsor Great Park is an area called Royal Lodge. Royal Lodge, incidentally, is where the Queen Mother used to live. It's currently where Prince Andrew resides, but close to Royal Lodge is a chapel. It's called All Saints, or the Chapel of All Saints. Royal Lodge is its official name. The Queen uses it quite a bit. So let us just remind you of this picture. What is this picture, Lizzie, from last summer?
This picture is the wedding of Princess Beatrice to Edoardo. And
Mozzi.
The photograph again happened during the pandemic, so they're socially distanced from Beatrice's grandparents, who are the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh.
And the reason we're showing you this picture is because that is where today Prince Andrew, Prince Edward, Sophie, Countess of Wessex, and their daughter, Lady Louise, went to for a service. So a chapel that means a lot to the Queen. Now, Lizzie, just explain, you were there this morning, so what happened?
So they were there for the Sunday service this morning, and after that service they met some of the congregation that had been in the church, but also some people that work on the estate. So wardens that have been involved in managing the public, wardens that have been involved in moving some of the flowers, people that look after some of the gardens, a litter picker. So people very much, they wanted to sort of thank them for the last few days, their support.
And presumably Prince Andrew kind of sort of walked from his house, didn't he? Because he literally, because you can see Royal Lodge from where you were.
You can see Royal Lodge from the chapel, and it's stone's throw. So he walked, and Sophie and Edward drove with their daughter from Bagshot Park, which is where they live.
Right, okay. So they went in for that service. Afterwards they spoke to some of the cameras outside. Before they did that, they spoke to some of the congregation, and we're going to play you something that Sophie said here. I should just say that she's talking about the last moments of Prince Philip's life. It was being recorded on the camera with her knowledge, with the knowledge of the royal household as well. Have a listen to it. We've got subtitles if you're watching on YouTube. If, however, you're listening on a podcast, we'll just read you what she said afterwards, just to make sure that you could hear what she said about Prince Philip's final moments.
It was right for him.
Probably people wear masks if they want to.
It was so gentle. It's just like somebody took you by the hand. Very, very peaceful. And that's all you want for somebody to do.
So if you didn't hear it clearly and you weren't watching on YouTube, let me just read what Sophie Wessex said. It was right for him. It was so gentle. It was just like somebody took him by the hand and off he went. Very, very peaceful. And that's all you want for somebody, isn't it? Those were her words that she gave describing the Duke of Edinburgh's final moments. We don't know, and nor necessarily should we ask, whether she was there or that was recounted to her by the Queen, who she saw yesterday.
Yeah, they went to visit the Queen at the castle yesterday, and the Queen has also seen Prince Charles, she's seen Andrew, and she's seen Anne as well. So she's seen all of the children over the last few days, and
today was the day for their tributes, essentially, wasn't it?
Yeah, and Sophie did seem very sort of emotional while she was there, completely understandably. And
because I think if you've just been to a church service, however you're dealing with it, and I think we'll tell you what Princess Anne said shortly, but kind of her words were, you might prepare for this day, but it's always a shock when it does come, no matter what someone's age, whether they're 99, 100. It's still a loss for the family.
And I think that's what we have to all remember here, is that although Prince Philip was such a part of public life and a sort of fabric of the country, he was, at the end of the day, a father, a husband, a grandfather, a great-grandfather, and he was such a central part of the family. And we are now looking at a family in mourning, and you could really tell that this morning, that they are.
Also, think if you've
hurting.
been to a church service and you've also been recounting the stories and and sharing memories, it kind of does
bring up those emotions,
bring up human emotions. And you said that Sophie looked very emotional.
She did.
So we're just going to play you now what Prince Andrew said. We're also going to play you what Prince Edward said and what Sophie, Countess of Wessex, said after that church service at that chapel outside Royal Lodge. This is Sunday morning in the UK. This is now a message from her second son and her youngest son, and also the Queen's daughter-in-law.
It's a terrible loss. But my father said to me on the telephone a few months ago that we're all in the same boat, and we must always remember that. But occasionally, we in the family are asked to stand up and show compassion and leadership. And unfortunately, with my father's death, it has brought at home to me not just our loss, but actually the loss that everybody else felt for so many people who've, as it were, died and lost loved ones during the pandemic. And so we are all in the same boat, slightly different circumstances because he didn't die from COVID, but we are all feeling a great sense of loss. But at the same time, the tributes have been absolutely amazing that I've seen, and the messages that I'm getting are absolutely outstanding. And I just want to say how grateful I am, we are, for these tributes. He was a remarkable man. I loved him as a father. He was so calm. If you had a problem, he would think about it. And that's the great thing that I always think about, is that he was always somebody you could go to and he would always listen. So it's a great loss. I think the way I would put it is that we've lost almost the grandfather of the nation. And I feel very sorry and supportive of my mother, who's feeling it, I think, probably more than everybody else. The Queen, as you would expect, is an incredibly stoic person, and she described his passing as a miracle, and she's contemplating, I think, is the way that I would put it. She described it as having left a huge void in her life, but we, the family, the ones that are close, are rallying round to make sure that we're there to support her, and I know that there is a huge amount of support, not just for her, but for everybody, as we go through this enormous change.
It's been a bit of a shock. However much one tries to prepare oneself for something like this, it's still a dreadful shock, and we're still trying to come to terms with that. And it's very, very sad. But I have to say that the extraordinary tributes and the memories that everybody has had and been willing to share has been so fantastic. And it just goes to show he might have been our father, grandfather, father-in-law, but he meant so much to so many other people. And just being here this morning with everybody from Windsor Great Park, and he was a ranger here for, more years than I think any other ranger. And, it means so much to so many people here. And it's the same for those who lived and worked at Balmoral and Sandringham. He's, for all those past and present, means a huge, huge amount to them. Very personal. They all had their own personal memories and stories, and our hearts go out to all of them as well.
Reminiscing there with some of the wardens about their tales. Everyone's got a story to tell, don't they?
That's because he always exchanged words with everybody, because it didn't matter what anybody was doing in and around the estate here and everywhere else. They all meant a lot to him, and he always took a very personal interest in everything that they were doing. So they all have got stories to tell, and most of them quite funny as well.
So if you've not been keeping up to date with the announcements on the funeral, we can bring you them here. So we had an update, the media had an update from Buckingham Palace on the Saturday afternoon, so the day after the funeral. It will happen on Saturday, which is 8 days after his death. There is national mourning in the UK for a week. It means that flags at all buildings, not the one here, by the way. We should point out the Queen's sovereign keeps flying here because she remains in residence here. But if you go anywhere in the UK at the moment, every national flag, Union flag, the flag of Scotland, the flag of Wales, all those flags will be flying at half-mast until the day after the funeral. That's national mourning, and royal mourning, the Queen announced, has decided, would be 2 weeks.
2 weeks, yes, yep. Exactly. I thought the funeral plans, there were three things that stood out for me. The first was that it's all still very much within the Duke's wishes and his kind of personal thoughts on.
So he didn't want a state funeral, and so therefore he will not lie in state. He's currently lying in rest inside the one of the chapels here at Windsor Castle.
Also, everything that is being done with the funeral, as with everything that's happening at the moment, is very much taking into consideration COVID guidelines and
Yeah.
safety. And the other thing is the family is at the centre of all the plans.
Yeah.
And they were signed off by the Queen. She took them away to consider the plans, but everything has family at the centre of it. And we'll see a reduced congregation because of COVID, only 30 members, and that will be made up predominantly of the family.
And that is currently the UK's regulations around funerals. Because of COVID pandemic, you're only allowed 30 people. That applies as much to the royal family as it does to anyone else in this country who has suffered a loss, and many people have over the course of the past year. 30 people at the funeral. If you think you've got the Queen, their 4 children, some of their spouses, because some are divorced, their grandchildren and some of their spouses as well, you kind of get to about 20. They've also told us that the Duke of Edinburgh's private secretary will also be going as well, Archie Bakewell.
So that takes us
to 21.
To 21. Now we know that 21 included the Duchess of Sussex and the Duke of Sussex. Now we know the Duke of Sussex is flying over from California to be here for the funeral, but the Duchess of Sussex will not be with him. She has taken advice from her doctor. She's obviously pregnant at the moment, and she will not be and
Harry and Meghan's office told us that Meghan did everything that she could in order to be here, but it was the advice of her doctor that she wouldn't come to this. No one will blame her for staying with Archie, and she's also heavily pregnant with their new soon-to-be-born baby girl. In the summer.
But
Harry, therefore, will have to do the quarantine thing. He doesn't have to, because we think kind of he could have got away with some diplomatic immunity, but I think because of all the messaging around this, they don't want to be seen to be getting any special treatment.
No, I mean, and we know that he's going to fall in line with COVID protocols, so one would imagine that he will come over and he will do the quarantine and he will test to be released in time for the funeral.
If you take 2 tests, one on arrival and one on day 5, and they're both negative, you do get released from quarantine. So he should be, all things being well, released for the funeral on Saturday. So let's go through the funeral plan. So it all starts just before 3 o'clock on Saturday. The body will lie in rest, and it will be some military pallbearers that will bring the coffin to the state entrance. So Windsor Castle is not just...
at the moment that the Duke of Edinburgh at present lies at rest in the private chapel, which is within Windsor Castle. That's where he is right now.
So there's a private chapel inside Windsor Castle. It's a big area. I mean, at the top here you can see what's called the... Mark, can you sort of pick out the sort of building just above the gates there, just above Cambridge Gate? There's a bit of a building there. This is basically the sort of state apartment and the private residence of the Queen and the royal family when she stays here. So the coffin is in that area. There's a quadrangle in the middle of that. So obviously, as the name would suggest, there are 4 walls around there and a quadrangle in the middle. So the coffin will come up, and there will be lining that quadrangle will be members of the military from the regiments and air bases and naval stations that he has a lot of attachments to.
Obviously, very close to his heart, the military, and then the coffin will go onto a Land Rover.
Well, here's the interesting thing. So let's talk about the Land Rover for a minute.
The specially modified Land Rover that was designed, or had a hand in designing, was the Duke of Edinburgh.
Yeah, and they told us this, that he had a hand in designing this Land Rover on which his coffin will go. Now, this is kind of says something about his life, isn't it? That he was very interested in design and engineering, and as they used to say in the sort of 60s and 70s, the white hot of industry. And he's, people might think it's rather odd, but then people do have a say in their funeral plans. They do express wishes on how they want to be buried, and the Duke of Edinburgh didn't want any fuss, but he did have this Land Rover.
It's nice. It will be a
really... No one's seen it. We don't know what it looks like, do we?
Don't know, and we won't find out until
the day.
And it's a really nice personal touch, a real, like you say, his love of engineering and design and science, and I think that will pay a sort of nod to that.
Yeah. So on to that, and members of the family, although we don't think the Queen, all this has been signed off by her, by the way. There's one thing we haven't spoken about, is actually the Queen, whilst the Duke of Edinburgh had wishes, and whilst they've had to significantly par down a lot of the funeral plans because of COVID, so therefore nothing's happening in London, everything is happening behind the walls of the palace, therefore people are being asked not to come. The Queen's had to sign them off herself. She's had to approve of her husband's wishes within the COVID guidelines.
And as you say, there'll be members of the royal family, including The Prince of Wales will walk behind the coffin as it is moved from the quadrangle round through the castle to the
So it goes
chapel.
round the round tower,
Yeah.
which most people might know because that's where the flag flies
Yeah.
from, round the round tower into what's called the lower ward and then into what's called Horseshoe Cloister, which is where the steps, what's called the west steps of St George's Chapel. The coffin will be carried up those steps. I think that's by the Royal Marines, isn't it? Because he was the Captain General of the Royal Marines. In fact, his final engagement before he retired was to say goodbye to the Royal Marines.
Yeah, I was there in the forecourt of Buckingham Palace
In
on
the
that
rain.
very rainy day, but that felt
Yeah.
like a very special
And some
moment.
beautiful pictures
to
from that as well. Actually,
be there
I'll have
for.
while we talk about that, this picture I put up on my Twitter, which is taken by a Press Association photographer called Huey Mock, where the Duke's just taking his bowler hat off. It's in black and white. The rain is sort of splattering around him, but it is a stunning picture.
Yeah, it seemed like an absolutely fitting final
Yeah.
engagement for him and the
Yeah.
tip of the bowler hat. But yeah, it did absolutely pour that day.
So the coffin will go up to the steps, and there it will pause on the middle of the west steps for the nation to take part in a minute's silence. This is at 3 o'clock on Saturday afternoon.
On Saturday afternoon, yeah.
At the top of the steps, he gets met by the Duke's coffin gets met by the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Dean.
Yep.
Of the cathedral, and then goes in for the family funeral. And as we've been saying, they are limited to 30. So not including the pallbearers, not including the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Dean of Windsor, because they are working. But the congregation or the mourners at the funeral will be limited to 30. The Queen, Prince of Wales, Duchess of Cornwall. I mean, we could go through the list. The Duke of Cornwall, the Duke of Cambridge, Duchess of Cambridge.
But as we said, all appropriate COVID measures will be in place throughout, and
Which presumably means distance, and presumably means face masks as well. So
yeah.
So so I think, but there's no special treatment here. So many families in this country have not been able to say goodbye to loved ones. So many families have had to go through this situation where they couldn't have gone to certain funerals for whatever reason because of COVID. So massively pared down. But some people have said, kind of, is that what the Duke would have wanted? Minimum fuss.
He was a no fuss man, wasn't he?
No fuss kind of guy.
So I think, and actually, I said earlier, family at the heart of it, these personal touches. Actually, maybe it is very in keeping with what he wanted.
Yeah.
And we should also say that at the end of the service, His Royal Highness will be interred into the Royal Vault in St George's Chapel.
So this is like kind of underneath where there are presumably some former kings and queens in there. So quite a fascinating place. I once did hear, by the way, there's only 3 people that are allowed into that Royal Vault. Do you remember the story? It's the Queen, it's the Dean, and it's the guy who operates the lift. But basically there's a little service lift, if you call it, where the coffin is lowered down into the Royal Vault at the end of the funeral. Such as, these things have to be checked, and it is checked, and it will, I'm sure, be checked before the funeral on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, I think Saturday, so Saturday 3 o'clock, will be a very moving.
And it'll be on television,
it'll
be on ITV, we will be here, you'll all be asked not to gather. And do you think people will come? I think they will.
Having been here today and seeing how many people have been bringing flowers, I think they're going to have to. I think it's going to be really tricky for them to manage this.
I agree,
I think people will want to come and pay their respects.
Much more so, really, than Buckingham Palace, because we were there yesterday. There weren't that many flowers. People were kind of getting about the normal business. It was busy-ish, wasn't it? But
we should also say that Buckingham Palace was there was a notice put up on the railings at Buckingham Palace on Friday after the announcement was made, as in keeping with tradition. The notice went up there and at the Palace of Holyrood House. It normally would have been up for 24 hours, but it was pulled down after just an hour to so that crowds didn't start to form. So they wanted to keep the tradition, but they didn't want to draw crowds.
And again, if you're watching on YouTube, we'll show you those pictures. And if you're not watching on YouTube and this podcast is in your ear, then all these pictures and the things that we're talking about, as we say every week, are on the Instagram page of @ITV News Royals. Tributes from around the world. Joe Biden, for example, what did he say? One heck of a guy.
One heck of a guy, yeah. Well, they've flooded him
quite
from
apt, isn't it?
around the world. I was looking at some statistics the other day, and the Duke of Edinburgh carried out 22,000 solo engagements during his public life. He retired in 2017, but he also undertook over 600 solo overseas visits. I mean, that's a staggering number. So he's really, he's got huge links to the Commonwealth, and they've travelled an enormous amount during their lifetime together.
Well, just going to you can listen now to a very small flavour of some of the many tributes that have come from world leaders. So let's listen to Boris Johnson, let's listen to President Joe Biden, let's listen to the Prime Minister of Australia, Scott Morrison, and also to the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby. A small flavour of some of the tributes that they've given to the Duke of Edinburgh over the past few days.
Like the expert carriage driver that he was, he helped to steer the royal family and the monarchy so that it remains an institution indisputably vital to the balance and happiness of our national life.
Well, first of all, Jill and I and the entire administration send our condolences to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II on the loss of Prince Philip. He was a heck of a guy.
The Duke's life was one of duty and of service, of loyalty and of honour. Memories of him will, of course, tell stories of his candour and a unique and forceful and authentic personality. But above all, he was a man who was steadfast, who could be relied upon, always standing by his Queen.
He had a righteous impatience. He would not accept the status quo. If things were not right, he would say so, and say so quickly and clearly, and often bluntly. Prince Philip also, though, had a deep and genuine sense of service and humility. Humility isn't about cowering behind things and refusing ever to say what you think. Humility is having the confidence to do what is right without thinking it's all about you.
And on Friday, on the day of the death, at Westminster Abbey, which was actually the place they got married, don't forget, in 1947, the bells were tolling, the tenor bell tolled. We also had gun salutes on Saturday, didn't we? Let's just quickly run through some of those. So the tenor bell, here we go, have a listen to it at Westminster Abbey. It tolled once every minute for 99 minutes, representing 1 year for every year of his life. So that went on from like 6 p.m, I think it started, until we worked out, was it 7:39? He's lived that many years, 99 minutes.
Maths is better than mine.
Yes. And also the gun salutes on Saturday.
Yes, gun salutes across the UK and at sea and in Gibraltar.
So there was HMS Diamond was in the English Channel. They fired guns. 41 gun salutes, so that's one round every minute, so it comes to 41. HMS Montrose was well, it was in the Gulf somewhere, off the coast of Oman. They did a gun salute. We can quickly show you Woolwich, the barracks at Woolwich. What's the interesting story about that?
There's a lovely link to Woolwich because the guns that were used there were also used for their wedding in 1947 and also her coronation in 1953. So that was a really lovely link there. And have a listen to one of the military members that we spoke to in Woolwich, who said actually we didn't have that much notice. We kind of had less than 24 hours notice because they announced it at midday on Friday before it was 11 o'clock on midday on Saturday when they did the gun salute, and a lot of people were on holiday. Have a listen.
I would say probably 50% of the soldiers were on leave from all over the country, all the way up in Scotland. So when the call goes out, everyone to head back. So it was, get back as soon as you can.
And then at Edinburgh, so the city from which the Duke took his name, or his dukedom, the Duke of Edinburgh. So they paid tribute to him by firing guns from Edinburgh Castle. They did, so a very fitting tribute to get around the UK, but also a nod to his very successful naval career by having the guns at sea as well, I thought.
It's a big moment, it's a sad moment, feeling for the royal family. It's a member of their family that they've lost, but yeah, proud to be a part of the moment. And that was an army reservist. She actually was not only directing the guns, but she works in the NHS as well, doesn't she? So she took part in that. So a historic day for members of the military. But then, here is a man, and I suppose we should talk about his legacy, about his military service. And a lot of people have said that, even Sophie Wessex said today, people are learning things about the Duke of Edinburgh because he lived such a long life that they never knew before, about his service in the war, for example, mentioned in dispatches for his
fight, his battles at sea in the Battle of Cape Matapan against the Italian forces, for hoiking British servicemen out of the sea off the coast of Japan after they'd been shot down. I mean, there's so many stories you can tell of this man who'd lived such a remarkable life.
And actually, I think it's well known and well accounted that he had a very successful naval career and could have gone right to the very top if he hadn't.
Could have been First Sea Lord.
Could have been if he hadn't married the Queen, and she went to the throne much earlier than anticipated in 1952 when her father sadly died suddenly when they were in Kenya. He gave all that up to be with her and by her side he remained for the rest of his life.
You might be able to hear a plane going over our head. The planes here are much less frequent than they normally are, because anyone who knows Windsor knows it's at the end of the Heathrow flight path, and because of COVID obviously there are a lot fewer planes than there have been. Normally there's about one every 90 seconds, but we were talking to somebody here earlier who said that actually after COVID they were actually waiting for the planes and cheered when the first plane went overhead. Normally in Windsor they don't like the planes so much, and I'm sure Prince Philip, who spent so long here, kind of got used to the noise.
Well, he actually, talking about him being here, I mean, it's the last year the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh have actually spent more time together here due to the pandemic, because it's where they spent lockdown, than they have lived together for many years, because he spent most of his retirement since August 2017 living at Wood Farm at Sandringham. So they've been apart for a lot of the time over recent years.
And in that year you've had the 73rd wedding anniversary, the picture when they were reading the card that the Cambridge children had made for them. There was the picture for his 99th birthday.
In the quadrangle,
in the quadrangle up there, and sadly, as everyone knows, he didn't make his 100th birthday, which was due in June of this year. So they have spent a long time here.
The Rifles engagement last summer when he gave over his role as Colonel-in-Chief of the Rifles to his daughter-in-law, the Duchess of Cornwall, and we saw him again in the quadrangle up there,
he looked
looking
so well that day, didn't he?
So well and fit.
Remarkably well.
And, I think we've said a lot that he's an incredibly proud man, and he always, when he was seen in public, was looked incredibly fit and well. He was sort of ramrod straight, never walking with any aids, even after his hip operation in 2018. A few weeks after he'd had that, he was at Harry and Meghan's wedding.
Wasn't going to be seen with a stick or anything else. So and actually managed, literally just a few weeks after his hip operation, he was at Harry and Meghan's wedding walking unaided. So it was remarkable, wasn't it?
Remarkable.
And that says a lot about him. And of course he died here just a few weeks after he'd spent his longest ever stay in hospital. He was in hospital for 4 weeks. He had that infection, then he went off for a heart surgery, then he came back for more treatment on the infection. So a lot of people said about the symmetry, that he died in the castle, not only where he'd spent the last year with his Queen, but also it was the place where his mother, Princess Alice of Battenberg, was born in 1885. This is, obviously, we're talking about the royal family here. It goes back many centuries. But his mother, Alice of Battenberg, who herself had a remarkable story and a remarkable life, she was born here in 1885.
And I think, when he left hospital a few weeks ago, he did look frail. He had spent his longest ever stay in hospital, but I think everyone wishes to be at home around loved ones, and as Sophie, the Countess of Wessex, said earlier, for it to be peaceful. And
also Prince Andrew, the Duke of York, mentioned the word miracle in one of his. It was a miracle. I think what we think he was referring to is a miracle that he didn't die in hospital. He managed to get home. He managed to come here to be with the Queen, to be with the woman he's been married to for 73 and a bit years,
and he said that
managed to get home.
Be a huge. Or the Queen had described it, didn't he say, as a huge void in her life, and I think she will really miss his presence. I know he's not had a public life for the last few years, but he has been there as her rock throughout good times, challenging times, a confidant, even if they haven't lived at the same residence. He's always there on the phone, isn't he?
Look, how do you sum up 99 years in one podcast, from a man who had a very nomadic existence from his birth in Corfu and having to leave Corfu because his family was in danger, to being bounced around various segments of his family, to going to Gordonston School, to launching the Duke of Edinburgh's award, to the service he gave the Queen, to his military affiliations, you could go on and on and on, couldn't you? To his carriage riding, to...
There was actually a really lovely quote here from a spokesperson for the palace who said, And this is, obviously there's the strength and stay and the role he played within the family. But it said, if you consider that in his lifetime he was a decorated veteran of World War II, of his love and passion for the skills of science, engineering, design and art, his dedication to the military, his support for the Commonwealth, his promotion of Outward Bound Trust, the World Wildlife Fund and the Duke of Edinburgh Award, you can see why his influence is so much greater than many may imagine the role of a consort to be. And I thought that summed up really nicely how, aside from the role he played with the family, what else he contributed to public life.
Yeah, and I think that probably does come back to what the Queen said about him, is like he has our thanks more than, or we owe him a debt of gratitude more than he will ever know. So we've got a busy week up until the funeral, or a busy week probably for those arranging the funeral. I would have thought things go a little bit quiet for a few days between now and then. And just it becomes a story of a family loss. And I think, as the Archbishop of Canterbury said, it doesn't matter your age, a loss is a loss. And I think you got that sense today when you met them at Royal Lodge.
Definitely. You could, definitely a family in mourning. And, he was such a central part of the family. And, often people talk about how the Queen was head of the firm and he was head of the family, and he was there for... He's been there for all of them for so long that he will be really missed.
We now, of course, have a widow queen. That itself might change how she operates. She has to now operate without the man who's been by her side, her confidant, her rock, her debater. We were talking about how many adjectives you could come out with, couldn't you? Her inquisitor, her instigator, her, it's just someone who people often say when you're in a position of power, whether you're a president or a prime minister, or yes, indeed a monarch, it can be a very lonely job. And the person that you can turn to when the doors have closed is your spouse, is your partner. And that is, I think, what the Queen will miss the most.
Definitely. But I think over
days and weeks.
Recent days we've seen the family really, particularly the children, really rally together to be there for her. The visits that they've been paying to see her. But yes, I think that's definitely right.
As we record this, we haven't heard from the grandchildren in terms of the Duke or Duchess of Cambridge. We haven't heard from the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, not on camera. They've obviously paid their own respects. And it's been a busy, difficult, challenging month or so for the royal family, given the departure of the Sussexes and Oprah Winfrey and all the rest of it, all while the Duke was in hospital. Sir John Major, the former Prime Minister of the UK, was saying today about whether this Harry coming back over at this particular time is a chance to heal a rift.
I mean, you can only hope, can't you? We've said so many times how sad it is that the sort of family drama really played out quite so publicly, and things seemed to be quite so divided. So, if this was a chance to bring them back together, then that could only be a good thing.
Well, that's a family decision, but we will see Harry here on Saturday. William will be there as well. They've both spoken about their, Harry in particular has spoken about their difficulties, their relationship being one of space. It'll be the first time, of course, Harry's seen his father since he accused him of, cutting him off financially and all the rest of it. But I think we've spoken about that in previous podcasts, and you can go back and listen to them if you so wish. But
we should just say,
one wonders what will happen. But Harry's in quarantine. We don't know where he's going to be in quarantine, but you wonder what will happen in the days running up to Saturday.
Yes, but talking about the Duke of Sussex and the Duke of Cambridge, reminded me that actually you see so much of their grandfather in them, but also the Prince of Wales, the things that he has passed on to them, particularly around the environment, that legacy has been passed on to them.
Yeah, people know Prince of Wales for his conservation and work on climate change. Prince William has also launched the Earthshot Prize recently, so we know it's passed from that father to that son. But obviously, where did Prince Charles get his love of nature, the outdoors, environment and conservation? Well, that came from Prince Philip. Some of that was instilled in him from Gordonston School. So you can trace all these things back a very long way,
we'll eventually
all the way to the 1930s.
See Prince Edward become the Duke of Edinburgh. He's very involved in the Duke of Edinburgh scheme.
Actually, before we wrap up, do you want to quickly just explain what happens to the title Duke of Edinburgh? Because we know it will pass to Prince Edward, who you saw today, but not immediately. Because actually, right now, it has passed to Prince Charles, hasn't it?
So it's passed to Prince Charles, and when Prince Charles becomes king, the title returns back to the crown, doesn't it?
Yes.
And at that point, it can be given to Prince Edward, and as I said, he is very involved in the Duke of Edinburgh, so that's
it passes to Prince Charles because he is the monarch's eldest son,
Yes.
or the Duke's eldest son. But he won't use it because he's got his other titles, obviously Prince of Wales, heir to the throne, Duke of Rothesay, Duke of Cornwall, and all the rest of it. So it will be Prince Edward who will be the future Duke of Edinburgh, and who will therefore take over and steer the Duke of Edinburgh's award scheme.
Well, yeah, I mean, he is already incredibly involved in it, and will continue to be. So it's lovely that legacy will continue.
We're going to step out of the shot now and just let Mark, if his fingers are still working, because poor old Mark, the cameraman, he's colder than we are, and my fingers are feeling quite cold. But we're just going to leave you with the scene here. So this is Sunday night here in Windsor. People are still going about their business, going out for their little walks here in Windsor, just coming to the end of the long walk, and in the not too distant future, in the next few moments, those flowers that you can see there will be taken away, respectfully we were told, won't we, Lizzie? Taken away, boxed up and removed and placed in the inside the castle walls, just outside St George's Chapel. So from us, from Windsor, it's been a significant couple of days for the UK, hasn't it, Lizzie? It has been
and
a
I
very
think
moving one for many people, but not a tragedy. This man didn't die unexpectedly. He was 99 years of age. He led a fulfilling life, a long life.
But undoubtedly a very, very sad few days, particularly for the family and for the Queen, who is in the castle there tonight.
Thanks for being with us. We'll see you on the next one.